That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, we are back for vengeance. We are back for some revenge because, oh my gosh, our wide receiver rankings video last week did horribly. I mean, we made some pretty bad calls. I'm going to try to steer y'all in the correct decision this week, but keep in mind everything that I say, not liable for. I am an idiot. You should never trust me with anything I say ever. But anyway, I'm going to be very happy to go through and talk about our top 24 wide receivers for this week. These are not rest of season rankings. Rather, these are going to be rankings considering matchups, also considering some current injuries. So, of course, we're going to dive into exactly those. But before we do, I have to pull up our last video to give away some Fantasy Flock Network hats. Y'all know every single video we are giving away multiple Fantasy Flock Network hats for the people who are subscribed to the channel, who went down there, dropped a like on the video, and at the same time left a comment. So let's go through and pick two at random. Our first one's going to be coming out from Casey Thompson, who says, a great channel, man. Keep up the grind and helping people win championships. Thank you so much, my friend, supporting the channel. Raiders fan since 1967 coming out, says, hello from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Just love to listen to your great advice. Would love a beautiful flock hat to wear around the beach and to Coastal Carolina football games. Go represent the flock. We'll get those hats out to you ASAP. Just make sure you send me your physical address through the email in the description of the video once you win that Fantasy Flock Network hat. Outside of that, my only other announcement is please make sure y'all are supporting the channel by making a $10 deposit on Underdog Fantasy, where they are currently doing in-season fantasy drafts, and they have very fun lines that you can be looking at for over-unders with these player props throughout the year. We've been profitable every single week so far this season. Of course, that's never going to continue to happen. Of course, Underdog Fantasy, I mean, you have to give them their respect that they wouldn't be paying me to get y'all to sign up if they were not a profitable company here. So we'd imagine that they're probably going to beat us eventually. But until then, we're loving life. And yeah, let's go through and let's talk about these wide receiver rankings, leading it off with wide receiver 1, who we will never have any lower than wide receiver 1 again. Let's talk about Devonta Adams here. Now, Devonta Adams has a damn tough matchup against the Chicago Bears. The Bears is a defense that I need to pay some respect to, because at the beginning of the season, I was saying that they weren't a defense we needed to be worried about, but clearly I was wrong on that, in that they definitely look significantly better than I thought that they were going to this season. And if we're looking at Devonta Adams, I mean, it's just simple. This is a wide receiver that nobody is coming close to the level of ceiling and floor combination that he possesses. And this is why we love drafting him in the beginning of round 1 in a lot of our fantasy drafts. You'll know how high we were on Devonta Smith this season. He right now, through 5 weeks this year, has 61 targets. He had 16 targets this past week. He had over 200 receiving yards. He had 11 targets the week before that, 18 targets the week before that. I mean, it's laughable, the amount of volume going in the direction of Devonta Adams. And keep in mind, it's very hard to go through and pinpoint exactly where touchdowns are going to go in a given offense. But with Devonta Adams, based on what we have seen historically, we know that he will have an above average touchdown rate for the wide receiver position. So knowing that he's only scored 2 touchdowns so far through 61 targets, I'm not worried. If anything, I'm happy knowing that we're going to get some positive regression coming in that category very soon. So yeah, Devonta Adams, really like what we're about to see. I think that he is the wide receiver 1. It's not even close. Now, our next guy will be in this same tier, however, just because we know that it seems like it's clockwork. Every time we get a disappointing week by the Kansas City Chiefs, the next week you're going to be getting over 200 receiving yards. You're going to get multiple touchdowns from Tyreek Hill, who so far is the wide receiver 2 in fantasy, going up against the Washington football team this week in Washington. This isn't a great matchup, but definitely you don't have to be nearly as scared as we thought we were going to be with this Washington defense coming into the season. I mean, with this Washington defense, just as a quick tangent, let me pull up what we have had so far this season, because it's hilarious in that this is a team that obviously every time you turn on a Washington game, all you hear the announcers talk about is the 4 first-round picks that they have on the defensive line, that you would assume that they were going to be able to get a consistent amount of pressure towards the opponent's quarterback every single week. However, in week 2, 29 points to Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. In week 3, 43 points against the Buffalo Bills, 30 points with the Atlanta Falcons, 33 points against the Saints. If anything, the Washington football team has had one of the worst defenses in the NFL, despite what their personnel may look like. Yeah, so Washington, not worried about it. Tyreek Hill, we know that he has the potential to drop 40 given points any given week. So yeah, I think we want to be playing Tyreek Hill at wide receiver 2. Now let's drop it down a tier, and we are going to go with the first surprise wide receiver on this list. let's go with Terry McLaurin at wide receiver 3. Now, y'all know with Terry McLaurin, I mean, oh my gosh, talk about a wide receiver that we whiffed this season. But still with Terry McLaurin, right now he's the wide receiver 15, so about where you drafted him at. But if you're looking at the underlying numbers under the hood, this is someone you can be very excited about going forward. He just played Marshawn Lattimore in the New Orleans Saints, where he did have 11 targets. He had 13 targets the week before. If we go back to what we had against the Atlanta Falcons, you had 13 targets, 6 receptions, 123 receiving yards, and multiple receiving touchdowns at the same time. With Terry McLaurin against the Chiefs, talk about a dream matchup. And you know that the Washington football team and Taylor Heineke, they are going to have to continuously drop back to pass, and having no Logan Thomas, having no Diami Brown is going to be making it where the targets just get funneled, where Terry McLaurin is a guaranteed player to see 10 plus targets this week, and a very good matchup against a very bad Kansas City Chiefs defense. I think you can expect the efficiency to be up with Terry McLaurin at the same time. So we will have him as a top 3 wide receiver this week. We'll have him at wide receiver 3. Now coming in at wide receiver 4, I know a lot of people are going to have him higher than this. I just think that the Los Angeles Rams are going to lean on the run. I mean, we're going to have Cooper Kupp. Now with Cooper Kupp, yes, of course, right now he is the wide receiver 1 in fantasy. He's neck and neck with Tyreek Hill, Mike Williams. Mike Williams we'll get to in a second. But still Cooper Kupp, I'm just a little hesitant to go through and tell you to jam him in above these other guys. Of course, you're starting him no matter what. Maybe this is for DFS. Maybe if this is we're talking about player props on Underdog Fantasy, these rankings can help you out. But here with Cooper Kupp, going up against the Giants with no Daniel Jones, with no Kenny Golladay, possibly no Kadarius Toney, no Saquon Barkley, no Darius Slayton, no Sterling Shepard. I mean, how the hell are the Giants expected to put points up on the board? I think that you could see Matthew Stafford only throwing the ball 19 times this game. I think that's in the range of outcomes. I mean, you also have Robert Woods getting 14 targets this past week. Of course, Cooper Kupp is still the wide receiver 1 in Los Angeles. We are going to have him in tier 2, however, at wide receiver 4. Now, our next wide receiver in this tier, oh my gosh, someone we whiffed on embarrassingly hard just a week ago. Doesn't really matter. We are going to have him as a top 5 wide receiver, despite him being the wide receiver 31 so far this season. We are going to go with Stephon Diggs in a very nice matchup against the Tennessee Titans. Also betting on this offense, betting on the fact that with Josh Allen here, clearly you want to just view the Buffalo Bills as a team that's a lock to put up 30 plus points any given week. And at the same time, we've only played 5 weeks so far this season, but with Stephon Diggs, we have seen close to 10 targets a game. If we want to go back to what we had at the end of last season, I mean, Stephon Diggs was just a monster in 2020. I don't want to say that you're going to see really anything change from last year into this, or I mean, back then, Stephon Diggs literally was the wide receiver 3 in fantasy with 20.9 points per game. I mean, this is someone we know has the talent profile. The offense is still fantastic. This is a game where they'll put up a considerable amount of points against the Tennessee Titans. So yeah, we're going to have Stephon Diggs as our wide receiver 5. I know it's aggressive. I know we've been horribly wrong with Stephon Diggs so far this season, but I'm not going to be changing our priors that much. I mean, he's still getting the opportunity. He still is in one of the best offenses in football. Now, our last wide receiver in this tier does have a tough matchup, but he's coming off a very tough game with DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins will be our wide receiver 6. Now, I know people are screaming at us for not having Mike Williams up as of yet. Trust me, I understand. I hear you out on this one. And I know DeAndre Hopkins right now, I mean, he's getting crushed by Mike Williams if you're looking at their points per game. But if you're looking at what DeAndre Hopkins has done so far this season, in a game where you actually had him going up against the San Francisco 49ers, where the Arizona Cardinals weren't effectively able to push the ball down the field, he still was fantastic from fantasy standpoint, and that he had 6 receptions, 87 receiving yards. He had a receiving touchdown to go along with it. And if you're looking at weeks 3 and 4, I'm throwing them out the window. I mean, there's no reason to be using those and just trying to predict DeAndre Hopkins going forward, because keep in mind, he did suffer that rib injury back in week 2 as well. So you can almost throw out weeks 2, 3, and 4 because he was dealing with the rib injury in week 3. I mean, he probably shouldn't have even played against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The only reason he played is because his name is DeAndre Hopkins, and he does not miss games. If we're looking at really the only weeks that he has been healthy so far this season, week 1 against the Titans, 26 points. Week 5 against the 49ers, 20 plus points. I mean, Hopkins still, if you're looking historically, this is a wide receiver that has an extremely high floor and ceiling combination. We will have him in tier 2 at wide receiver 6, even though going up against a tough defense on paper with the Cleveland Browns. The Browns just gave up 40 plus points against the Chargers. Now let's go to our next tier of wide receivers, leading it off at wide receiver 7. Yes, we will go with the wide receiver that everybody is screaming for us to talk about right now, Mike Williams. Mike Williams going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Trust me, I know exactly how dominant Mike Williams has been so far. This is a wide receiver that's playing alongside Justin Herbert in one of the best offenses in football. This past week, 8 receptions, 165 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns at the same time. Literally, out of all of our $250+ drafts that we did this offseason, Mike Williams is my most drafted wide receiver. You don't have to be trying to come out here and make a bullish case. We've showed that on the live stream, me just flexing on y'all and how many high stakes leagues we have Mike Williams in. Love me some Mike Williams. Still, I can't be viewing him in the same tier of DeAndre Hopkins. This is someone that's had 6 touchdowns through the first 5 weeks this season. That is 100% going to regress. It sucks to say. I think Mike Williams is going to be a low in wide receiver 1. Maybe you can make the argument that he's a mid wide receiver 1 rest of season, but he's not a top 3 option. Let's be realistic here. Now, our next wide receiver coming in at wide receiver 8 in the same tier will be DJ Moore, coming off a disappointing week this past week, but still with DJ Moore, it's a wide receiver that from an overall season-long standpoint, you love what you've gotten where he's had, through the first 4 weeks, this is a wide receiver that had 43 targets so far, only 24 years old. You would imagine that he would continue to get better throughout his entire NFL career. So I really like what we have from this overall offense with Carolina to take a step forward in a bounce back game against the Minnesota Vikings. Now that will include DJ Moore, and with DJ Moore, I definitely want to make sure that we are monitoring the Christian McCaffrey health status going into Sunday, because the healthier CMC is, the less we probably like DJ Moore, if we're going to be honest. Now, our wide receiver 9 will be Justin Jefferson, also going up against the Carolina Panthers in this same tier. Now, with Justin Jefferson, just a very safe option. Top 10 wide receivers so far this year. Right now, he's sitting at wide receiver 10. If you're looking at the volume in this offense, he's averaged 9 targets a game. But keep in mind, with Justin Jefferson, that's actually more than he had his rookie season. This is just a player that his game is built on efficiency. This is someone that's built on seeing the ball a little deeper downfield than what you would have with someone like Tyler Conklin or Adam Thielen. So yeah, love what you have Justin Jefferson. Tough matchup. Still top 10 wide receiver. Now, our last wide receiver in the top 10 will be Keenan Allen against the Baltimore Ravens. With Keenan Allen, one of my top buy low receivers at the moment. Keep in mind, I have Mike Williams in way more leagues than I have Keenan Allen, but they are still neck and neck for me in this offense. If you're looking at it, he's had 53 targets so far this year with only 1 receiving touchdown. That is 100% going to skew in the opposite direction, where if he's seeing this volume in a Los Angeles Chargers offense that will be able to effectively push the ball down the field and have a considerable amount of trips to the red zone, you know that the touchdowns are on the horizon for Keenan. So yeah, against Baltimore, not the best matchup, but still a wide receiver I definitely want to be betting on as a top 10 guy. Now, let's go down a tier. Let's go to wide receiver 11. It's going to be a very aggressive ranking on a player that plays on Thursday night. So if you're watching this on Friday, you're watching this on Saturday, feel free to make fun of me here, but we are going to be going with Devonta Smith. With Devonta Smith, yes, we're ranking him ahead of Jamar Chase this week. Yes, he is only so far the wide receiver 32 this season. But still, this is someone that we have seen have close to 23% of the team targets in Philadelphia. This is the best matchup ever against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, knowing the Buccaneers are going to be able to put points up on the board, knowing that they have a very good run defense and it's going to force the Philadelphia Eagles to consistently throw the ball on Thursday night. Also, no Dallas Goedert is going to mean that you're getting a bump up in projected target share for Devonta Smith. This is a wide receiver 1 this week. He's a low in wide receiver 1, high in wide receiver 2. Start him everywhere. Trade for him before Thursday night if you can, because this will be a player that's taking a significant step forward with his overall fantasy football value. Now, wide receiver 12 going to be playing in the same matchup, same tier, will be Mike Evans. With Mike Evans, I think we still probably would rather have Chris Godwin the rest of season, but with Evans, with no Rob Gronkowski here, that's 100% going to be giving him a bump up, because you would naturally assume without Rob Gronkowski, Mike Evans would be the go-to red zone threat in this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. If you're looking at this past week, he does get 2 receiving touchdowns to go along with it. We know Mike Evans isn't a really much of a yard after the catch wide receiver, so if you're seeing those receiving touchdowns here, you know it's not that big play that Mike Evans caught the ball in the 40, then he ran it 40 yards to the house. Mike Evans essentially catches the ball, falls down. Nothing against Evans himself, just kind of the wide receiver that he is with that big frame. So I think when you do not have Rob Gronkowski in this offense, which Gronk is ruled out for Thursday night, you have to be extremely excited with what you'll have, considering how productive this offense is going to be overall. Now, our next wide receiver in that same offense, Chris Godwin against the Philadelphia Eagles. I know that Antonio Brown was the guy that had all the production not that long ago. And trust me, I understand it. I mean, if you're looking at Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin so far this season, I mean, Antonio Brown right there in fantasy production. Chris Godwin is the wide receiver 14 with 16 points per game. I mean, Antonio Brown, literally 17 points per game. Antonio Brown's been more productive so far. However, I think this will be a bounce back spot for Chris Godwin. He does not come away with the touchdown this past week where you had Antonio Brown and Mike Evans soaking all those up. Not going to be predictive going forward. At the same time, this is someone that's coming off an 11 targets, 7 receptions, 70-yard performance. Really like what we have from Chris Godwin. Still going to be having him ahead of Antonio Brown by, honestly, it's going to be easy for us. Now, our last wide receiver in this tier will be Jamar Chase against the Detroit Lions. Fantastic matchup for Chase. I mean, you would imagine that this game is going to be close enough where the Bengals do have to throw the ball. He is a top 10 wide receiver so far this season. I am going to be expecting him to regress slightly when you do have T. Higgins coming back at 100% strength. But this is someone coming off 19 targets over the past 2 weeks. He had 159 yards this past week with a receiving touchdown to go along with it. Obviously, an elite talent emerging in this offense, 21 years old, in a plus matchup against the Detroit Lions. If we're not 100% sure that T. Higgins is just going to be seeing his usual snap share this week, let's go Jamar Chase at wide receiver 14. Now let's go down one tier here. So this is going to be pretty much a big drop in tiers, but still, let's just roll with it. We have Amari Cooper at wide receiver 15 with the New England Patriots. Tough defensive matchup. Still with Amari Cooper, I mean, playing in an offense that nonstop, it's 40-point performance, 40-point performance, 40-point performance. I mean, if we're pulling up so far what we have had from the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, Dallas this past week against New York, 44 points. Against Carolina, 36 points. Against Philadelphia, 41 points. I mean, this has been a fantastic team in effectively moving the ball down the field. I think this will be a tougher matchup, however, against the New England Patriots. But I mean, with no Michael Gallup back in, you're still going to continue to see that these targets are funneled to Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Lamb is going to be our next wide receiver at wide receiver 16. If you're trying to determine who you want between Amari and Lamb, I just think it really comes down to if you're going to be looking at the overall numbers out of these two wide receivers, I know that they are relatively close. You have Amari Cooper at wide receiver 18 with 16 points per game. You have CeeDee Lamb at wide receiver 28, but pretty much 15 points per game. They're only like a point and a half away from each other. But if you're looking at CeeDee Lamb, this is a wide receiver that really hasn't dealt with any injuries. This is a wide receiver that has had no obstacles at all with his own role in this offense. Where, I mean, this is almost the exact opposite of the case in what you had with Amari Cooper, who was dealing with the rib injury in weeks 2 and 3, dealt with a hamstring injury in week 4. Now, Amari Cooper, I mean, is someone that I think you can just be looking at saying, well, coming off of back-to-back 15-point performances, I know he only has 3 receptions in each game, but you could possibly be expecting this to be a little bit closer where the Cowboys have to throw the ball a little bit more, and he should be 100% healthy. So yeah, I think we want to go through play Amari Cooper. Now our wide receiver 17 here will be, no, not Antonio Brown, who I know everybody wants to see. However, it's going to be someone that's been extremely disappointing so far this season. A.J. Brown. Now with A.J. Brown, hear me out. We know the Tennessee Titans are going to have to consistently throw the ball against the Buffalo Bills. They may not necessarily be that effective in doing so, but they're going to have no other option in this game. The Bills are going to be able to put up points against a very bad Tennessee defense. To go along with this, A.J. Brown is seeing, on average, about 24-25% of this team's target share so far this season in healthy games. And on top of all of this, A.J. Brown, based on what we had the first 2 years in his NFL career, he was one of the most efficient wide receivers in the NFL. So now if we're going to be looking at him saying, okay, do we need to be changing our priors that much based on a 3-game sample rather than 2 full seasons that we had as a rookie and a second-year player? No, A.J. Brown really not lowering his value much at all from where we had him coming into the year. Now our next wide receiver at wide receiver 18 will be Deontay Johnson going up against the Seattle Seahawks. Hate the matchup. Think it's going to be a very low scoring game. I think both teams are going to try to run the ball. I mean, neither have a great quarterback, but still no Juju Smith-Schuster. Deontay Johnson is going to be very safe with the amount of targets he has in this offense. Yes, this is higher than where we ranked Deontay Johnson a week ago, because a week ago, what were we saying? We were saying that it was worrisome when you were going to have Chase Claypool coming back to an offense that had a healthy Juju Smith-Schuster. Claypool was going to be stealing targets away from Deontay Johnson. Yeah, Deontay Johnson only had 2 targets this past week. Kind of saved his fantasy day with probably the longest touchdown he's ever had in his NFL career. But with that being said, no Juju Smith-Schuster, completely different situation. The target share is very safe. Now, our last wide receiver in this tier will be Antonio Brown at wide receiver 19. With Antonio Brown, I mean, very similar to what you have with Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. I mean, maybe you could try to make the argument that they're in the same tier. I just think that it's so hard for me to go through and just forget everything that we had with Chris Godwin coming into the season, just to go out there and roll out Antonio Brown, who, yes, has been better over the past 2 weeks, where he's had 19 targets over the past 2. But in the first 2 weeks, however, this is someone that had only had 10 targets. So still averaging about, I mean, what's 29 divided by 4? He's averaging about 8 targets a game, maybe 7.25 targets a game. He's getting less volume than Godwin. He's 33 years old. I'm probably just going to prefer Godwin. I know over the past 2 weeks he's been significantly better. He's had a higher touchdown rate, which is something we know to avoid. I would prefer having Godwin over him, and it's going to be, honestly, quite easily for us. Okay, so now let's get to our last tier of guys here. We got some names I know people think that I missed out on, but I promise you I didn't. Our next guy will be Hollywood Brown in this first tier, going up against the Los Angeles Chargers. Now with Hollywood Brown, I mean, he could easily be higher on this list by the time we get to the end of the week. But right now, at the time of this recording, we don't know what's going to be happening with Sammy Watkins and his availability. We don't know what's going to be happening with Rashad Bateman and his own availability. If Hollywood Brown is the only wide receiver out of this group, I think you do want to bump him up possibly to the higher tier, possibly to the top of that higher tier. But still, I'm going to be expecting that you get added target competition coming in. I'm going to be expecting that you get a significant regression with the overall passing volume in Baltimore. But still, Hollywood Brown, definitely a top 24 wide receiver. The next wide receiver will be DK Metcalf going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Honestly, I could make an argument to have DK Metcalf lower than this, just because with Geno Smith being his quarterback, Geno Smith historically has been one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL from an efficiency standpoint. I know he was fine this past week in a very small sample. DK Metcalf looked great at the same time. I'm not betting with that. It's a tough matchup with some of the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL. Avoid DK Metcalf where we can. Sell before this week. Please, please, please. Now, our next wide receiver will be Robert Woods going up against the New York Giants. Very similar to Cooper Kupp. Don't expect this to be an offense that has to throw the ball consistently. I think that with this Giants offense, they're just going to roll over and allow Darrell Henderson, who we have ranked as a top 10 running back this week, to run the ball 20+ times this game. Then next, we have Adam Thielen at wide receiver 23 going up against Carolina. With Adam Thielen, I mean, we have not changed our stance on him at all over the past few weeks. I mean, we had him as a sell-high player after the first 2 weeks of the season where he had 3 touchdowns in the first 2 games. But still, with Adam Thielen, he's the same guy you've always known. I mean, this is a touchdown or bust player. I mean, yes, when he gets 2 touchdowns in a given week, everybody's going to be jumping up and down who drafted him. When he doesn't, everybody's going to be panicking. So don't be changing your assessment on Adam Thielen too much. Now, our last wide receiver on this list will be T. Higgins, who I'm hoping is going to be more healthy going up against a nice Detroit Lions matchup. I would look to start T. Higgins where we can, but I really want to be reading the shoulder reports throughout the week. Now, yeah, that's all I got for y'all. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And you know I'll be live streaming every single night. And when you go and make that $10 deposit on Underdog Fantasy to go check out some of those player props, check out some of those drafts, use promo code FLOCK to get the max deposit bonus and daily additional entries to win a Fantasy Flock Network hat and support this channel more than you would ever believe. Yeah, that's all I got for y'all. Hope you have a great day, and I hope I see y'all in the live stream tomorrow.